Hey there, Polymaths. Captain Compton here with some advice on how to apologize. This seems to be quite a foreign concept today. The way that I've experienced people apologizing usually takes place in the form of, I'm sorry, but you gotta know where I'm coming from. I was having a really rough day today, or I'm under a lot of stress. And what we're doing is we're asking to be excused. That is where the word excuse comes from. Whereas with a genuine apology, we're looking to express remorse and let it be known that we did make a mistake and that we're owning up to it. The reason that we process apologies like this is because that is how these situations go down, and except for like the very rare instances where you actually like sit down and try to plot against someone, it's usually the example of hurt people. It usually is you messing up because of an affecting factor that is prior to your behaviors and thoughts. And so that's what you're essentially apologizing for, is you're apologizing for your processing system slipping in its processing of the affecting factors. So indeed, the proper way to apologize is to express genuine remorse. Let's just give an example here. I want you to know I am genuinely remorseful for what I've done, and I am hereby apologizing for that, and I'd like your forgiveness if I can earn it. As much as that tugs on your ego, as hard as that is, that's what we need to say. Alright, let's try to put this into a 3-step process here. Step 1. Genuinely apologize. Just make the apology, make it well known that you are sincere and remorseful in your apology, and that you do not wish to do it again. These are major parts of the apology, like you have to make it known that you're intending not to do it again, and that you intend to make it up to them if it's possible. After that, we can proceed to give the explanation, but the moment that we do, it begins to sound like an excuse. Automatically, this is the case for most people, at least in the West, it seems to be, because it can often be taken as an excuse as opposed to an explanation, even if you say it's an explanation. Oftentimes, people are entirely rejecting of the explanation altogether because they're residing in what I call the retribution mindset. They want 1,000 apologies before they even begin considering the idea of forgiveness, as is well portrayed in the South Park episode, wherein Al Gore seeks an apology from the US citizens for making fun of him and ignoring his warnings against man-bear-pig, or global warming.
We didn't realize there were
Say
more than...
you're sorry for making fun of me.
We're sorry for making fun of you.
That didn't sound serial at all.
So this brings me to step 2, giving the explanation. Again, unfortunately, this is extremely contentious, especially in the United States. Ideally, we would put it in a question form and ask them if it's alright if we provide an explanation such that they can understand the situation better. But because it apparently requires the rare patience and open-mindedness of a Buddhist monk to actually agree to that, we can instead say, I want to offer this explanation not only for you to view me in a better light, but humanity at large, as well as working towards preserving our friendship. I want you to know what influenced my behavior. But again, this is not an excuse. And then you can proceed to give the explanation, or the influential factors that contributed to the mistake in our judgment. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you can see how easily manipulated we are as a species. We are basically like really complicated biological processing systems that process information as it comes in, and often doesn't come out the way that we want it to. So another way to apologize, if we were apologizing to a physicist or a determinist or reductionist, we could say something like, I'm sorry, my processing system is malfunctioning and I take ownership of that. Given that there's no little homunculus inside my brain that's actually calling the shots, I have to talk about myself as a processing system, and some part of that has to be in charge. I want to take ownership of my processing system behaving in a dysfunctional way with others, and I want to attempt to bring that back in line with them by offering the explanations as to why it got off track. Again, not an excuse or a justification. So I offer the explanation to give something to relate to, so that we can improve our relationship, the way that we relate to each other, to give the backstory on the matter. And of course, if you look at this from the universal embodiment perspective, I am technically a processing system for universal introspection, one that seeks to bond with other universal experiencing vessels through explanation of our wayward behaviors as opposed to negative judgment. So we offer the explanation and conclude that explanation by saying, again, I want to stress that this is not an excuse or justification for my behavior. It is an explanation for the factors that contributed. And this brings me to step 3. After offering that explanation, we can, again, remind them that we want to make it up to them somehow, and we can begin discussing how they can do that. And of course, remind them that we're going to promise to try to not do it again. We can't make a promise that we won't do it again, because again, we are processing systems, and a lot of times we get up on the wrong side of the bed, and we end up making the same mistakes. It's hard for us to keep our critical judgment on, which we'll talk about more later. And this brings me to step 4, apologize again. You have to make it very, very clear that you are indeed remorseful and that you are indeed sincere in your apology. We cannot always keep our critical thinking and self-awareness on at all times. Yet to engage in society, we're expected to be on at all times. That's just something to think about. I want to examine the ego here on this a little bit too, just so we can have a little bit more relation when we are the party that's being apologized to. the reason that people find it so hard to apologize, especially in the culture that emphasizes such pride and such status, it is hard for us to shake the personal story that we tell about ourselves. That is always difficult, no matter what culture you're brought up in, but especially in cultures where it emphasizes like such independence and the ideas that you can do no wrong or it ruins your reputation or whatever. It's like the emphasis on bolstering your reputation is highly encouraged in this culture. In the United States culture, I should say. Like when I've had my father try to apologize to me multiple times, and he'll always do this thing. He'll never actually say sorry. He'll say like, I guess I screwed up there, but it's because of such and such and such and such. And I'll end up saying, well, that's not really an apology. And it's like, well, I'm not trying to apologize. Like, damn, dude, you really can't even say you're sorry. Can you? And I could either hate him, and I don't like even using the word hate anymore because of this mindset I'm trying to present. Or I can view him in the best light possible. And I can view him in the best light possible by considering this crazy need to bolster our ego. To shake the foundation of one's personal narrative is a heavy thing to ask, especially when you've spent many decades bolstering that same ego and either believing that you're right or feeling it necessary to tell yourself that you're right to keep yourself feeling safe and secure and included in the tribe and therefore survivable, or therefore safe, and that contributes to survival. I talk about this a lot more in the book. Again, these are not excuses, they're not justifications, but they are explanations. And the more explanations we can find, or at least look for, the more forgiveness and patience and grace and understanding and empathy we can share and we can garner in ourselves towards others. Now I want to say that criticism works very much in the same way. When we go to criticize people, we want to be very, very gentle. We want to say it in a non-judgmental fashion. We want to first examine the kind of criticism that we're giving, because we can give non-helpful judgmental criticism or helpful criticism where it is constructive, is what we tend to call it, constructive criticism. When we start this process of criticizing others, we have to be very, very gentle, again, because we are approaching shaking someone's ego, and their ego is highly tied to their identity and how they define themselves in the world. And when you begin to shatter that, their first reaction is going to be like, no, I've got it under control, I have my situation, you know what I'm saying. And I claim that that's directly tied to a biological survival instinct. Because in the past, probably for many thousands of years, we would be seeking approval through feedback, and that would give us a sense of security in the tribe, which equates to ego. Because if we were rejected by the tribe, that would result in excommunication, which results in death, or very much compromises our survival. So getting approval and seeking approval and ego stroking and all of that kind of thing, and groupthink, or having reassurance that a certain group approves of what you're doing, all of that ties into survival instinct. And so when somebody tries to challenge that idea that the group that you're involved with, or the way that your group has been thinking, is wrong or is not exactly lined up right, then your security about yourself in the world begins to crumble, and that is a direct threat. I assume that is what's going on when we get the heart racing, when we get the fight, flight, or freeze response from this. I mean, that's what we see when we're confronted by a bear, and it's also what we see when our belief system is confronted or questioned. And even if that's not the case, wouldn't you rather view it that way so that you can view people in a better light and be more forgiving and patient with them? Sorry to elaborate on this, but I want to make another point. It's not just this biological survival instinct theory that is going on with this. I have another theory on how this works, is that it is very much involving the default mode network and how we solidify personal narratives about our lives. That too, when that is also questioned, that too can make our heart race. That can definitely set in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, likely because of the default mode network. I mean, the more I study neuropsychology and neuroscience, the more I see evidence for this whole compartmentalization due to energy conservation and the path of least resistance. In cognitive science, this is referred to combinatorial explosion. There's simply too many combinations of factors that it becomes explosive to try to comprehend all of them. So we settle. We settle into default modes about the way that we view the world and our place in it. And when that is questioned, bad things start to happen in the brain, like the regions of the brain that have become dependent on interacting with each other smoothly and comfortably for years in the same ways that they have been to establish neurostasis, become compromised. And that neurostasis, like literally homeostasis and neurostasis, becomes in question, and the whole organism is thrown into a tizzy. It was definitely like thrown into a place where It is extremely uncomfortable because it is, again, at a loss for assembling itself. Like it comes back to the ego and the identity of the person, how that has been well established through time. Like, this is questioning the identity of the organism, and that's not comfortable. That's never comfortable. And as we see in therapy practice, there is no self-improvement that's going to come without some uncomfortability. We have to accept no pain, no gain. Anyways, bit of a tangent, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So now we looked at a couple ways to explain scientifically why people do the wayward things that they do, and how we can better relate to them because of that. Now I'd like to present some ways of looking at apology that will behoove the person being apologized to. I'll talk in first person just to make this part clear, and I'll read directly from the script. I did write a script for this video just because I really want to get this point across. So, as the person being apologized to, ideally I will come to the apology with open arms and understanding, and seek to relate more to them, not less. I still want my apology, and I'm gonna get my apology, but I also want to understand why they did the thing that they did, so that I can view them in the best light possible. I want to stress that this is not rose-colored glasses. This is embracing the idea of the way that you face the world determines the face that you see in the world. It doesn't behoove me to always be looking for the negative in people. Rather, I want to be looking for the most helpful, mentally healthy way to view people as possible. Because the alternative is to seek tit-for-tat ideology or vengeance mode, or whatever you want to call it. This comes from judging them at face value, at superficiality, from forms of unhelpful judgment, instead of looking deeper to understand them and get more out of the relationship. The alternative is making sure that they know that what they did doesn't line up with the way that we want things to be, which can be quite selfish, unless it concerns things that the general public doesn't approve of, which is a different discussion. That would be the situation where you take people aside and tell them, hey, this is probably not going to go well in public, what you're doing here. This is approaching the situation in a singular mindset. Initially, our emotional egos want instant justice and instant gratification. We want retribution, and we want them to feel shame. We want them to feel bad. We almost want to see them blush and things like that, which is really sad. That's how the brain seems to work when it's not taught otherwise. Again, I don't know how this works in the East, though. I mean, I assume if you're brought up with the idea that everyone is connected and we are all part of the same world and we all share the same resources and we're all made of the same stuff, it might be easier to seek that form of understanding and open-minded seeking to relate to each other in that way. I'm not sure. I mean, at least in the West, for example, just look at the long history of people like peasants, like bowing to their masters, their kings, or like kissing the ring. There are two forms of bowing, and I've examined this a fair bit because I really enjoy like the different forms of interaction and the concept of namaste as well. Like, we have the handshake in the West, but in the East they have the bowing, because that is a symbol of lowering yourself, and you're making yourself lower in a form of respect. Like, I'm no better than you. I deeply respect you by symbolizing that. Let's take a look at this again.
Al Gore was right. Al Gore was right all along.
Al Gore was right all along.
We should have listened to Al Gore.
We should have all listened to Al Gore. Wait, are you videoing us?
We don't want the person to be wallowing in shame. We don't want them to have that lump in their throat and that fight or flight mode. This is a useful evolutionary mechanism to let us know that we messed up and that we've done something against the tribe. We get into this fight or flight mode, we have our hair stand on end and our heart will start racing when we're put in a place of shame. And that's why things like public shaming work very well. And being put in your place can work very well. But it's not the most ideal method. We want to do something that's more mature, do something that's more kind-hearted and relational and relatable, and empathetic. Making people feel like they've been put in their place is a last resort. We don't need to do that. We're not babies. Another reason this tit-for-tat ideology develops is due to cultural influence. The bioecological system that we grow up in encourages us to often be overly critical to each other and boost our egos by putting others down. We want to be apologized to, but we want to see the best in people. When someone offers to make it up to you, you can acknowledge that good quality. The alternative is wanting them to admit that they have some badness or evil that's within them, and they're ashamed of having that within them, like they're possessed or something. Again, taking the universal embodiment mindset on this would abide by the quote from Socrates, "There is no good versus evil, there is only wisdom versus ignorance." This takes the path of most compassion by necessity. We don't seek to view them as an evil person, or a bad person, or even a person that has bad habits, but rather a misguided processing system that likely has thousands of influential factors that are highly unexamined, and some that are unexaminable, like some that they can't even be aware of, either because of their innate neurobiology setup or because they haven't been given the tools to expand on their capacity for introspection to such a degree. What we're witnessing is them getting off track in their path towards their best version of themselves. Again, hurt people hurt people. Approaching their apology with kindness and empathy, we would actively seek for the explanation and help them try to remedy it such that they might pursue that best self, rather than simply ending it after we've gotten our fill of apologies. Yum yum, that was a tasty apology. Oh, thank you, now go away. It's like, definitely not like that. Looking for the explanations and contributing factors for the reason that people do the things that they do can be extremely liberating. At least that's been the case for me. It weighs easier on my psyche to have the explanations for why people do the crazy things that they do, because that relieves my desire to judge them negatively. Well, I shouldn't use the word crazy there. I'm trying to stop using that word now. What I should say is that I'm seeking the explanations for the misguided things that people do. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I can still get my apology and seek the explanation so that I can better relate to the person that's offended me. That's why we clarify that crucial difference. There is also another way to look at this. A lot of times we do actually want the explanation for what the person did, but we ask it in anger. We ask it like, what did you do? Why would you do that? Like, you know what I'm saying? How many times have you heard that? And it's like, you don't actually want to know why they did that. You just think they're stupid and you want them to admit to it. And that is just not, it's not healthy. It's not the CBT term helpful, and it's also not healthy. Like, it's very much not the right way to go about that.